The NFL season is officially here. Last night, the Chiefs won a nail biter at home against the Ravens, and right now, the Packers and the Eagles are in a tight one in Brazil, about to go to halftime as I record it. So, today I'm going to give you my NFL season predictions. I'm going to go over division winners, playoff picture, award winners, and at the end, the Super Bowl winner. It looks to be that we're set up for a fantastic NFL season this year. So here are my predictions. Let's start with the AFC South. Now, in last place, I have the Tennessee Titans going 3-14. Yeah, I just don't think the Titans are going to be good this year. Will Levis at quarterback, I just don't think that's the move. I like the signing of Tony Pollard. I think that defense is going to be okay. There's not really much going on there. New head coach, I just don't really love the Titans this year. I don't know really how you could. I just don't like Will Levis. I don't think he's the future there. I think they're going to be one of the bottom teams in the NFL this year, and I'm finishing last in this, I would say, pretty competitive division. Next up, having another pretty disappointing year, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars finishing 8-9. I think their season's going to go up and down, really, just like it did last year. They started off the year last year on fire, looked like the clear favorites to win the division, and then just completely fell apart at the end of the year. I think Trevor Lawrence is a really good quarterback, but I think that the fear is he might just be average. And that's really not what you want when you take a guy that high with that much prestige. And he really just hasn't shown that he could be one of the top quarterbacks like the Mahomes or the Lamars or the Jalen Hurts in the league, or Josh Allen, I should say, as well. But yeah, I just don't think that Trevor Lawrence is in that echelon of quarterback yet, and I don't know if he ever will be. And while I like some of the pieces that this team brought in, I just don't see them really competing to win the division with some heavier hitters to come up, including the Indianapolis Colts, who I have going 9-8. But this is a team I could totally see competing to win the division and making the playoffs as well. This team is scary. If Anthony Richardson is a really good quarterback this year, then watch out, because this team could make a lot of noise. Their defense is going to be good like it was last year, and their offense was very, very good last year with Gardner Minshew at the helm. And I just think it's going to continue with Anthony Richardson in the backfield. I really like this team a lot this year. I think the receivers got better. The run game's going to be good again. Jonathan Taylor fully bought in as he was last year. I really like this Colts team. I think they can make noise, but I do have them just missing the playoffs and going 9-8 and winning the division. I have the Houston Texans, CJ Stroud. I really don't think we'll sophomore slump. I think he's going to have a really good year like he did last year. And all they did was bring in great players. Danielle Hunter, Stephon Diggs, the list goes on and on. That defense is going to be super, super scary with D'Amico calling it. And that offense is just going to continue to roll while throwing the football. They also brought in Joe Mixon. I really don't see them running the football all that much. I really do still see that offense being very pass heavy. But the dynamic of Mixon could definitely help them out a ton. As I talk about this, Jayden Reed just scored a 70-yard touchdown for the Packers. He's on my fantasy team. Let's go. But yeah, Texans really good this year. I think they can make a run. They're Super Bowl contenders. I don't think that they're Super Bowl favorites by any means, but I do think that they can make some noise in the playoffs and make a deep run. I don't think they will win the Super Bowl or even make it, but I do think that they could for sure. If CJ has the MVP type season he had last year, and he wasn't like, MVP caliber, but it really was a fantastic season. But yeah, if he could have one of those types of seasons again this year with the weapons that they brought in on both sides of the ball, this Texans team could definitely be very, very, very scary in the postseason. So yeah, I think they do win the division, and I think they can make a playoff run. Now let's move on to the AFC North. Coming last in this division, which might be a surprise to some of you, I don't know. I just think it's kind of obvious and clear who the odd man out is in this division. For me, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just think that they don't really have a foundation on offense. They don't know who their quarterback's going to be for the full year. Is it going to be Russ? Is it going to be Justin Fields? We don't even really know who's starting week one, because Russ is dealing with, I think, a calf problem. So we really don't even know what the deal is week one with this team. And I know Mike Tomlin, all he does is win games. All he does is finish with a winning record. But this team did get dramatically worse. Now, that defense is still elite, still top 5 defensive football, and that's why I think they win 6 games. I think without that defense, they're looking at 2 wins this year. I really think that offense is not very good. Really, all you have weapon-wise, in my opinion, is George Pickens. No weapons on offense. You don't know who your quarterback is. Pittsburgh's just going to have a really down year. Now, saying that, I think Pittsburgh's future is still very bright. They have a lot of young guys. They have a lot of young guys on defense and offense. I think their future is bright. I just don't think this year is going to be the Steelers' year. I think this is going to be their step back year. I think Mike Tomlin's going to retire. I don't think they'll fire him, but I think he'll retire. He was already on the fence about it last year, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I think Mike Tomlin retires after this year, after a 6-11 season, and Pittsburgh begins to rebuild. And I think it will be a pretty quick rebuild, much like the Bengals, for different reasons. But yeah, I think it's a quick rebuild. And yeah, I just don't see the Pittsburgh Steelers performing very well, especially in what I believe is the strongest division in football. Coming in third place, I have the Cincinnati Bengals, but 11-6, so they're still a playoff team. I just think that they are the third best team in the division. And while their offense is super, super high powered, and yes, Joe Burrow's going to come back and he's going to be great, there's just questions for me on the defensive side of the ball. And already week one, there's receiver problems. Jamar Chase might not play. T. Higgins is doubtful. They're going to have some problems week one. Now, they are playing the Patriots, so I still see it as a win. But it does worry me for this team throughout the year. If their receivers don't stay healthy, their offense takes a big step back because the run game got worse too. And your defense already isn't that good, in my opinion. Now, if they're still an 11-6 team, Joe Burrow's still going to do Joe Burrow things. I don't think they're at where they were in 2020, even close to it. So, yeah, I just have them finishing 11-6. Still a great year, still a playoff team. Just third in the division, but again, really, really strong division. And now let's talk about the team that they can't beat, my Cleveland Browns, man. Cleveland Browns, I got them finishing 12-5. Now, saying this, the Browns could be 9-8, 8-9. The Browns could have a bad year if Deshaun Watson isn't good. He's been phenomenal in the past. Can he repeat those things? I don't know. Although, in his starts last year, he was 5-1. The defense is the best defense in football, and if they can be that again this year, this team will not fail. It's impossible. Your defense wins you championships, plain and simple, and all Deshaun needs to do is be okay. That's all he has to do, is be okay. You brought great weapons to help him be okay. In Jerry Jeudy, you have Amari Cooper back, David Njoku, Jerome Ford's going to start off the year at running back. Hopefully Nick Chubb comes back at some point in the year and can be Nick Chubb again. And that defense is just stellar. You lost some not so key pieces like Sione Takitaki, some guys that were very important to this defense's success, but not like your key players. And you brought in some other guys to kind of fill those holes. So I really do think the Browns are going to be very successful again this year, as long as everybody can stay healthy, because that was a big problem last year. Obviously, not everyone stays healthy, but the majority of the team, the majority of the key players stay healthy. And if Deshaun Watson can at least look like a glimpse of himself again on the football field, I think the Browns could be very, very good, make a deep playoff run, be Super Bowl favorites, that type of stuff. They could even win the division. Unfortunately, the Ravens play in this division. I have them going 14-3. Even with that loss to Kansas City last night, I picked them to lose that game, and I still have them finishing 14-3. It's crazy starting 0-1, going 14-3. That's how good this team is. If you watched them on that Thursday night game, that offense was very, very scary. Isaiah Likely came out of nowhere. Obviously, people know he's a good player. He's young. He's a very good player. But nobody expected him to have the game he had. Lamar looked on point. Sure, it wasn't the best game of his career by any means, but he looked very good in a week one start in Kansas City, the defending two-time Super Bowl champions. So I think it's really positive in Baltimore. Now, Derrick Henry did look pretty slow and old, in my opinion. However, it did open up the run game a ton for Lamar. So Derrick Henry might not have a Derrick Henry year this year, but it will open up the run game a ton for Lamar. And once teams start cracking down on Lamar, I think that's when you see Derrick Henry thrive more and more. And I just think this team's going to be, again, one of the top teams in the AFC, Super Bowl favorites, and a force to be reckoned with yet again this year. You have the returning MVP. He's going to have a great year. Ravens going to be great this year. Now going on to the AFC East. Coming in last place, it's the Patriots. This team is not good. Jacoby Brissett starting week one over Drake May. We'll see how that goes. I don't think it'll be long before Drake May plays. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't play all year. I don't know. I just think this team's not going to be very good. They don't really have anything on offense, not much on defense. They blew the defense up, and there's just no weapons on offense. There's not really much to talk about the Patriots this year. They're just in a rebuild, and they're going to be really, really bad. One of the worst teams in the league. First overall pick contenders. I'm going 2-15, picking in the top 5. This team is going to be very, very bad this year, in my opinion. They also play in one of the most competitive divisions in football, and that does not help them at all. So yeah, I just think the Patriots are just not going to be that good this year. I think everyone thinks that, so not much else to say. In third place, this might be surprising to some of you. I have the Buffalo Bills finishing 9-8 and not making the playoffs. Now, yes, Josh Allen is Josh Allen, and the Bills have been a winning football team for like 5 years now, but they got so much worse in the offseason. That defense is old. No more Tre'Davious White. Jordan Poyer's gone, I'm pretty sure. That team just got much worse in the offseason and didn't bring in much to fix it. I think this is another team that's going to go into a small rebuild. I say rebuild. I think they're going to finish 9-8 and be a really competitive team this year. And they're going to win some games that maybe they shouldn't. But yeah, I think this team just isn't as good as they have been in the past. They've very clearly taken a step back, in my opinion. And I just think that it's going to be a tough year for Bills fans. However, I don't think it'll last very long. I think the Bills will be good again next year. I just think they're going to need a year to not make the playoffs because they just don't have the roster for it. It's coming in second in the division. I do have the Miami Dolphins finishing 10-7 and just barely making the playoffs. I just think the Dolphins are overhyped. I don't know if that's the word, but I feel like everybody talks up the Dolphins, and yes, on paper, they should be fantastic. Tua's been a great quarterback in the past. Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and on the defensive side of the ball, you have Jalen Ramsey, Bradley Chubb. You have all these great players, but for some reason, when you put it all on the field, it just doesn't always work out. And yes, they beat the Broncos by 70 last year, but the Broncos were terrible. And they are going to beat up on these bad teams, but when it comes into these big games, these playoff-like games, I just don't think the Dolphins have it, especially when you come up north into teams like Buffalo, Cleveland, in that terrible weather. It's just harder for the Dolphins to win, genuinely. They're so used to playing in that beautiful weather in Miami, and it's just harder when you come into these colder weathers and playing in snow, playing in negative degrees. It's very hard for a team like that to adapt, especially when the other team is so used to it. So yeah, I just think the Dolphins, they do make the playoffs. I think they're going to have a good year, and they could definitely be better than 10-7. I just don't think they're going to be as good as people think. And then the surprise of the division, with Aaron Rodgers coming back, are the New York Jets finishing 12-5. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy and has somewhat of an Aaron Rodgers year, this team will be disgusting. You have some gross weapons on offense in Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams. This offense is scary if Aaron Rodgers is at the helm. Trust me, this offense will be so good as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy. And then that defense is still a top 5 defense in the league. That defense was awesome last year. I don't see why it wouldn't be awesome this year. The Jets, I think, are Super Bowl contenders, absolutely. And I think that they can make a deep playoff run. They just have to stay healthy. That offensive line has to stay intact, and they have to protect Aaron Rodgers. So that's why I think the AFC East shakes out. Let's move on to the final division of the AFC West. Coming in last place in the AFC West are the Denver Broncos. I think this is worst team in football contenders. This team is really bad. Bo Nix could have a great year and prove me wrong. I doubt it, but Bo Nix could come out and have a really CJ Stroud-like rookie year and just prove everyone wrong, and the Broncos could finish with 8 or 9 wins. I just don't see that happening. I think this defense is terrible. This offense is terrible. They have no weapons. Everybody's young. Bo Nix is like 26, 25. I don't know. He's old rookie, picked at 12th overall, and he's really not that great of a quarterback, in my opinion. I just don't think the Broncos' future is all that bright, and their team sucks now. I think the Broncos are just going to have a terrible year. They really just have not been the same team ever since that 2016 Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, and then he retired. They just have not been anywhere near as good of a team since they won that Super Bowl and Peyton retired. They haven't been able to find their quarterback. Their defense hasn't looked as strong as it was in those times. They just haven't been the same, and I think that track continues in this year. Coming in third, I have the Raiders. Now, I do think the Raiders could surprise some people and be better than this, but I do have them winning only 6 games. Gardner Minshew at quarterback, maybe Aiden O'Connell down the line. I think Davante Adams is a big trade deadline type guy this year. I think it's going to come to the point where the Raiders are not playing very good and Davante Adams will want out. And I do think that they can get a pretty okay price for him at the deadline. I just don't see this Raiders team being very successful. Now, the defense I think will be very good, but the offense is just going to hold this team back so much this year. I just don't see them being competitive, especially in the same division as the Chiefs. Now, I do have the Chargers coming in second. I have them finishing 7-10. I think they're going to be okay this year. Jim Harbaugh's first year, I think they could be much worse than this and maybe a little bit better. Justin Herbert just doesn't have anyone to throw the ball to. He's still an elite quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks in the game. He just has no one to throw the ball to. And the running back room is messy. You've got both guys from Baltimore and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who are both coming off season-ending injuries, and you don't know what they're going to look like. J.K. Dobbins hasn't been healthy pretty much his whole NFL career, and when he has been healthy, he's been great, but he just is never healthy. So yeah, I just don't think this Chargers team is very strong. Their defense stayed intact, still going to be okay, but that offense is just not it for me, and I do have them finishing 7-10 this year. Obviously, first place, Kansas City Chiefs going 14-3, looking to win the Super Bowl once again for the first three-peat in the Super Bowl era. This team is just stacked. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is pretty much the same team from last year, except their receivers are better. That's a scary fact for the rest of the AFC and the rest of the NFL. This team is still the favorite to win the Super Bowl, and obviously the favorite to win the AFC West. Now let's move on to the NFC. Starting with the NFC East, I have the Giants finishing in last place. Not much of a surprise, going 2-15. This team is really bad. Daniel Jones, not a good quarterback. Now, I do love Malik Nabers. How could you not? He's an elite player. He's going to have a really good year one. But again, he's got Daniel Jones throwing him the football, and Daniel Jones just isn't a franchise quarterback. I think that is clear to pretty much everybody except the Giants organization when they gave him all that money. However, this defense did get better. They lost Xavier McKinney, but they brought in one of the best pass rushers in football, Brian Burns. I just don't think that makes much of a difference for this team in winning games. I think their defense will be okay, but their offense is just so poor that I just don't see them being in many games, let alone winning many games. I just have them finishing last. I think they will probably be picking in the top 3 this year, looking to grab their new quarterback of the future. In third place, I have the Washington Commanders going 4-13. Now, Jaden Daniels could surprise me and have a really great year. I'm just not super high on him, and I just think that this Washington team doesn't really know what they want to be. They made moves in the offseason like they want to win games, but when you really look at the moves, you see Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner, guys like that who are at the tail end of their career and don't really have anywhere to go but down. I just don't see this team being very successful this year. Now, I do think that they could win more than 4 games for sure, but I don't see them winning any more than 7. I just think this team's going to have a pretty tough year. Coming in second place and making the playoffs, I have the Dallas Cowboys, who are going to have a great year. That's what they do. They play great in the regular season and then just sell in the postseason. That's what the Cowboys have done in recent history, and that's what I think they'll continue to do this year. No spoilers for the playoffs, but yeah, I just think this Cowboys team is going to have a very good regular season. I do see CeeDee Lamb not having quite the year he had last year. There's no big stakes for CeeDee Lamb this year. The hype on him is so high, and he just got that big contract. I just don't see him having quite the year he had last year. I still think top 5 receiver type of year, but I just don't think it'll be that amazing season he had last year. And I just am not the biggest fan of Dak Prescott now. I do still have them winning 12 games, and I think they're going to be very good. I just don't think this team did enough in the offseason to compete with the first place team in this division, which are the Philadelphia Eagles, who I have going 13-4. Yeah, this team is really good. They got better. They brought in Saquon. They brought in some key defensive players. They drafted Quinyon Mitchell in the first round, who I think could be a sneaky defensive rookie of the year player. I don't think he'll win it, but I think he'll be in conversation. I think he's that good at corner. And yeah, I just think this team's very good. They're battling with the Packers right now. I think they're losing at halftime, but it's a close game. And I do have them winning this game. Even if they don't win this game, I do think that they're going to be at the top of this division, whether it's 13-4, 12-5, maybe the Cowboys go 11-6 or 10-7. I'm not sure, but I do think that this is the Eagles' division to lose for sure. Now, the Cowboys could for sure go on a run and take the division from them, but I just think that the clear best team in the division is still the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's move on to the NFC West. Coming in last in the NFC West, I have the Arizona Cardinals, but I do have them going 6-11 this year. I think it'll be a much improved year. I do think Arizona is going to have a decent year. They bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., who's going to be the top weapon in that offense, and I do think the defense got a little bit better this offseason. I just don't think that they are quite there yet. I do think that this team could progress over the next few years. I don't know if Kyler Murray is the quarterback of the future or to take them to the playoffs, but this team is still very foundationally strong with young players. And I think that that could be very, very good for their future. I just don't think they're there yet. Moving to third place, I have the Seattle Seahawks going 7-10. I think the Seahawks are going to have a weird year. I think they're going to start off pretty okay, and then kind of towards the back end of their season, I think they have a tougher schedule, and I think they're going to start dropping more games. And I do think that they could compete for this division, or for a playoff spot, I should say. I just don't think Geno Smith is quite good enough to take this team over that hump and making the playoffs. I think after this year, they start rethinking things at quarterback. Their defense is still pretty good, and their offensive weapons are good. I just don't think this team quite has enough to be a playoff contending team. Moving on to second, I have the LA Rams sneaking into the playoffs at 10-7. This is just dependent on if Matt Stafford stays healthy. But if Matt Stafford stays healthy, this team could be really, really good again this year with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams. They brought in Blake Corum from the draft. I do think this offense could be pretty high-powered, pretty scary to play against, hard to cover. And their defense, not great, but good enough to win you 10 games, in my opinion. And that's pretty much all they're going to need in the NFC to make the playoffs. So I do think this team sneaks into the playoffs at 10-7, and it's a tough division, sure, but I do think that they are good enough to come in second. Winning the division, I have the 49ers going 13-4, and there's not much to say here. The 49ers are the clear best team in this division. They are probably the best team in the NFC, with Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. The list goes on and on and on. I don't even talk about the defense. The defense is probably the highlight of that team somehow, with that offense being as good as it is. Yeah, this team is a force to be reckoned with. Lost in the Super Bowl last year in overtime. Definitely could go back to the Super Bowl this year. Definitely Super Bowl favorites in there with teams like Kansas City, Baltimore, teams like that, the Eagles. But yeah, I do have the San Francisco 49ers winning the division. Moving on to the NFC North. Coming in last place in this division, I think it's pretty clear it is the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings do not have a quarterback at the moment. It's Sam Darnold, and I just don't think that's going to work out for them too well. Obviously, that offense around him is pretty good with Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, but this is a quarterback league. You have to have a good quarterback to compete in this league, and Sam Darnold just isn't good enough. That defense is actually pretty good. I like that defense, and I do think the Vikings could surprise us in some games this year by hanging in it with that defense. I just don't think the offense will be good enough to compete enough. I have them finishing 5-12, and I think their hopes are back next year when JJ McCarthy, who I'm not very high on, but he will come off IR next year. Obviously not playing at all this year. Yeah, I just think that injury hurt them way too much and puts them at the bottom of this division this season. Coming in third, I do have the Chicago Bears. Now, I know a lot of people are high on the Chicago Bears, think the Chicago Bears can make the playoffs. I just don't see it. They have too many young players on offense, especially their quarterback, to make a playoff run, in my opinion. Now, I know the Texans did it last year with CJ Stroud, and can Caleb Williams be better than CJ Stroud? Absolutely he can. But I do think it's somewhat of an anomaly. It's just really hard to win football games your rookie season, starting at quarterback all year. But if there's a quarterback that's going to do it, it's Caleb Williams, especially with the offensive weapons he has. Brought in Rome Odunze in the draft. You brought in Keenan Allen in a cheap trade. And obviously you still have DJ Moore. You signed DeAndre Swift. That offense does look pretty scary. It's just they're going to have speed bumps. They're going to have games where Caleb Williams isn't exactly on it, and they're just going to run into some roadblocks. I think that defense is very, very good. But yeah, I just have them only winning 8 games. Could this go differently? Absolutely. They could win 10, 11 games, but I just don't see it happening. I think their floor is probably 7 wins. I think they're in this 7 to 10 win range. But yeah, moving into second in the division, I have the Green Bay Packers finishing 12-5 and making the playoffs. This team is really, really talented. You just signed Jordan Love to the highest paid quarterback contract ever, which is a little crazy in my opinion, but you got your guy. And Jordan Love was phenomenal last year. I think he looks to continue that this year. And I think this team's going to be strong. You lose Aaron Jones, you bring in Josh Jacobs, you brought in some really good defensive players, especially in Xavier McKinney. I think this team could be very scary come January with that high-powered offense, with that receiver room, with that solid defense. Yeah, I don't have them winning the division, but I do think that they definitely could. and I definitely think they're one of the better teams in the NFL at the moment. Winning the division, going back to back, I have the Detroit Lions. This Lions team is on a mission to win the Super Bowl this year. They couldn't get it done last year. They won the division for the first time in 20 years and fell short in the NFC Championship game against the 49ers, in a game that they probably could have won, but they just kind of fell flat in the second half of that game, if I remember correctly. And yeah, this team is really, really, really good. Their offense is one of the best in the league. Jared Goff is a really good quarterback in this league all of a sudden. And you have guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. The list goes on and on. Sam Laporta. And then the defense is super, super good as well. Aiden Hutchinson's becoming one of the best pass rushers in football. And the defense around him is also very, very talented. I think this team wins the division, and I think they have a long playoff run. Finishing up the NFC and the NFL, we are going to move on to the NFC South. Coming in last of this division, I have a repeat of last year in the Carolina Panthers. They win one more game than they did last year, going 3-14. Bryce Young just has to prove to me and everybody else that he is a legit starting quarterback in the NFL, which he was clearly not last year. He's just too short, and he had a really terrible supporting cast around him. You bring in Deontay Johnson to kind of help him out. But yeah, this team is just going to be really bad. They lost Brian Burns. They didn't bring in anything really else to help the team out. I think this team's going to be terrible again this year and picking in the top 5 once again. Moving into third place, I have the New Orleans Saints. I'm pretty low on the Saints this year. It seems like some people think they could win this division. I just don't see it. I think Derek Carr is one of the more overrated players in football. I just don't think he's very good. And yes, while I like the weapons they have on offense in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, I just don't think they're good enough with Derek Carr at the helm. And their defense really doesn't scare me much either. They brought in Chase Young, which could revive his career, but it's on a one-year deal. Now, obviously, I'm just talking about this year. But yeah, I just don't see it being a very good football team this year. And yes, this division is pretty weak, but I do think they come in third in it. I really do. But moving into second place, I do have just missing out on the playoffs. The Rams take their spot. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could make the playoffs again this year, just like they did last year, where they took out the Philadelphia Eagles. They're just not good enough on paper for me. Obviously, they were good enough last year, but the division was worse last year somehow. And I just don't think that they will be as good as they were last year with a team like the Atlanta Falcons getting as good as they did this offseason. I think Baker has another pretty solid year. Mike Evans over 1,000 yards once again. The defense is okay. I just think that they fall a little bit short this year and miss out on the playoffs. And winning the division, I have the Atlanta Falcons going 11-6. They brought in Kirk Cousins, who is coming off an Achilles tear, if I'm not wrong. It's either an Achilles or an ACL tear. It might be an ACL tear. Regardless, you bring in Kirk Cousins to be your franchise quarterback. Now, you drafted Michael Penix in the draft. I'll never get over it. It's one of the worst mind-boggling picks of all time. You drafted an old quarterback to back up your quarterback who you just signed for 3 years. What are you doing? Regardless, the Falcons have a really high-powered offense with Kirk at the helm. You have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, who knows, maybe he does have that bounce-back year like people think he could with Kirk Cousins throwing the football. And then obviously the strong suit is the run game with Bijan Robinson. And you bring in Raheem Morris to head coach your team, who is a defensive-minded guy. I think that's going to help this defense out a ton, because while they weren't great last year, they have the talent to be good. And if this defense could be good enough with that offense being as high-powered as it is, this team could be scary and could make some noise in the playoffs for sure. But yeah, I do have them winning the division. And that's it for the league and how I think the divisions are going to wrap out. Before going into the playoffs and the playoff picture, I am going to go over my award winners for the regular season. So starting out, I'm going to talk about the Offensive Rookie of the Year, which I think the easy pick is obviously Caleb Williams. I think it's very easy to say Caleb Williams will win the Offensive Rookie of the Year with that offense he has around him, with as talented of a player as he is. And I do think it'll happen. However, I do have another honorable mention here. I think Brian Thomas Jr. could also give Caleb a run for his money. I think by the end of the year, Brian Thomas will be receiver 1 in Jacksonville. I just don't think that he'll have a good enough year to beat out Caleb. But I thought I'd throw his name in here because he is such a talented player. They got him at a really good spot in the draft, and I do think that he will be the best receiver in that Jaguars offense by the end of the year. But yeah, I do have Caleb Williams winning the award. Moving on to Defensive Rookie of the Year, I have Laiatu Latu from the Indianapolis Colts, the first defensive player taken off the board at I think 15 or 16. This guy's a stud. As long as he could stay healthy. He did have health concerns at UCLA, had to retire from football at one point. I think he started in Miami, retired in football. I think he started at Miami, retired from football, and then went to, as I say that, deep A.J. Brown touchdown, something like 60 or 70 yards. But yeah, I think he started at Miami, went to UCLA, and in the middle, he had to retire from football. But if he could stay healthy, he's a force to be reckoned with. I think he was the best defensive player in the draft, and I think he could have a really, really solid rookie year, winning him Defensive Rookie of the Year. Now, moving on to Comeback Player of the Year. This one, I also have two guys I want to mention. My first guy is, I think, the less likely guy to win it, but it's Nick Chubb. If Nick Chubb can come back midway through the season and look like Nick Chubb again, I think the award is on a silver platter for him. Will that happen? I just don't know. I think there's a really good chance Nick Chubb doesn't even play this year. And if he does, will he look like himself again? Probably not right away, but this dude's a freak, and he's top 2 running back in the NFL for a reason. And if anyone could do it, it's this guy. So yeah, I think that he definitely can win the award this year, but I think the obvious guy to win it, if he stays healthy, is Aaron Rodgers. Tore his Achilles 4 plays into the season last year, and I have the Jets going to the playoffs with a 12-5 record. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have a great year as long as he stays healthy, and I think he's the clear winner for Comeback Player of the Year. Moving on to Coach of the Year, I have Raheem Morris of the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons go 11-6, win the division with a rookie head coach, Kirk Cousins, at the helm. I think it's pretty clear that Raheem Morris would deserve Coach of the Year. And yeah, I think the Falcons are going to be good this year. And I truly do believe in it. And I think that Raheem Morris is going to have a really good kickoff to his coaching career. Moving on to Offensive Player of the Year, it's Garrett Wilson. Now, obviously, this is a little bit of some Ohio State bias, but if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy all year, Garrett Wilson is going to be scary, scary good, in my opinion. You brought Mike Williams to pair up with him, and that's just going to take some pressure off of him, in my opinion. And Garrett Wilson could very well put up a 1,500 to 1,700 yard, 10 touchdown type year this year. I think Garrett Wilson is so freaking talented. And with a guy like Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football, watch out, because that Jets team is going to be very scary. So yeah, Garrett Wilson winning Offensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, I have Micah Parsons. You've seen TJ Watt win it recently. You just saw Myles Garrett win it last year. I think it's time for Micah Parsons to win his. It's like all three of these guys are going back and forth on who is going to win Defensive Player of the Year, and I think this year is Micah Parsons' year. Now, I think another guy who could win it is Max Crosby, besides those other guys I just mentioned, but I do think Micah Parsons finally gets over that hump this year and wins Defensive Player of the Year. He's definitely capable of doing it. And finally, we have MVP of the league. I went a little controversial with this one. Didn't want to pick a quarterback, so I went with the best non-quarterback in football, Christian McCaffrey. Won Offensive Player of the Year last year. I think it's very, very possible that CMC has the best running back season we've ever seen. Catching the ball off the backfield, rushing the ball. He's going to score a ton of touchdowns. I think CMC could absolutely make a run for MVP of the league this year. And that's, I think, my fun pick for MVP this year. Obviously, guys like Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes could be those types of guys to win it. But I wanted to go a little bit different. So I have Christian McCaffrey winning MVP this year. Now, let's get into that playoff picture. Based off how I picked the regular season ago, this is what the playoff picture will be looking like. Now, in this first matchup, Browns at Texans, it's a matchup from last year's first round as the same seeds. And this year, I think the Browns get their revenge and move on to the divisional. I just think the Browns are on a mission this year, and I think this is a year where the Browns could make some big noise in the playoffs. Sure, there's some bias there, but I really do think that the Browns could be good enough to make a run. Now, next up, we have this Jets Bengals game. And in this one, I have the Jets beating the Bengals at home. And I just think they're the better team, especially with Aaron Rodgers healthy. The Jets are just a much better team for me. So yeah, I think they take down the Bengals in the playoffs and move on to the divisional to play the winner of the Ravens-Dolphins game. And I think this one for me is the Baltimore Ravens moving into the next round. So I think that's how it's going to shape up in the AFC divisional round. Kansas City against the Browns, Jets versus the Ravens. Now on the NFC side, we are going to start off with this Cowboys-Falcons game. And like I said earlier, I think the Cowboys will fumble this game away and the Falcons will win a close one at home and move on to play the Eagles in the divisional. And in this next one, I have Lions at home against the Green Bay Packers. I think this could be a crazy game. I think the Packers could definitely win this game, but I do have the Lions moving on. I think the Lions, much like the Browns, are on a very, very big mission this year. Both teams have been so bad for so long. I think both teams are looking to make long playoff runs. And this last one on the NFC side, it is Rams at Niners, and I think the Niners win this one pretty easily, making it a Eagles-Falcons divisional matchup and a rematch of the NFC Championship last year in the Lions against the Niners. Going back to the AFC, we have Browns at Chiefs, and I'm taking the Browns. This is revenge for that game a couple years ago, the Anything is Possible game, and I think the Browns march into Kansas City, show what they're made of, show how good that defense is, and shut down that three-peat for Kansas City. In this bottom game, we have Jets at Baltimore, and I think Baltimore wins that one, making it an AFC North matchup in the conference championship of the AFC. Going over to the NFC, we have Eagles at home against the Falcons, and I have them winning that game, going back to the conference championship like they were a few years ago. And I have the Lions moving on against the Niners, getting their revenge in San Francisco, moving on to play in Philadelphia for the NFC Conference Championship. In the AFC, I have my Cleveland Browns moving on to the Super Bowl. Yeah, there's some Browns bias going on here. Do I think it'll happen? Probably not. But can it happen? Absolutely, it can. This team is good enough to make a Super Bowl run, I promise you. And playing them in the Super Bowl is a Super Bowl that I think everybody would love to see. It would be Browns against the Lions, two teams who have never made the Super Bowl. So we'd be crowning a new Super Bowl champion no matter what. And I'm going to take my Brownies to win it all this year. Now, do I think it'll happen? Probably not, but it definitely can. And that's it for the video. I definitely think that it's going to be a great NFL season. Had to take my Browns today. I'm too excited for the season to start. And I've got high hopes for the Brownies this year. Will it happen? Probably not. We'll probably win 5 games, and you'll never hear from me again. But yeah, that's it for my season prediction video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below. Leave it a like. Give me a subscribe. I really appreciate all those things. I've been pumping these videos out because I'm having a lot of fun with it. I love talking about football, get in front of the camera, and just feel like I'm talking to someone about football. So yeah, I really hope you guys are enjoying these. And yeah, have a good one.